Hi, Shaun Stoker. Welcome to this month's market wrap. Well, the month of May, we've definitely seen buyer behaviour change. They're a lot more cautious. They're doing their due diligence, and when they find something, they act. A prime example of that is 114 Rochester Street, Earlstonville, 2-bed, 1-bath. Does have the car space on 133 square metres. We had 87 groups through that property, 12 contracts out, 5 registered bidders, and it sold for $1,920,000. We also sold one at 142 Union Street. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, no car space, sold for $1,880,000. Saying that, they bought it back in 2021 for $1,910,000. That was right at the peak in 2021. And the reason they sold, and even though they sold for $30,000 less, is they're seeing brilliant opportunity out there for the larger houses that were once 2.8 million and now dropped to 2.4 million. So there's just a realignment on price, but once people are starting to get their heads around that realignment, they're moving forward. Another great example of the current market is when buyers see value, they're acting. I've got one at 164 George Street, Earlstonville. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath, renovated house, right in the heart of the village. Now we're pricing that at 2.2. We've had 60 groups through, we've had 7 contracts out, and there's 3 people coming to auction tomorrow. The biggest talk for the month of May has been surrounding the budget and the release of negative gearing. And what that means, owners and buyers have called me saying, how's that affected the market? Well, the reality is in the last 12 to 24 months, we've sold 200 properties. Around 6 to 7 of those have been to investors. It wasn't really in our marketplace anyway. That's because of what the prices were, and the rent return just wasn't there. That budget only affected the sentiment to the investor, which was only about a 5% of our buyer pool. I know I go on about this, but majority of my owners are young couples who buy a house in this marketplace. They have 1 or 2 children, and then they think of change. This is the perfect time to transition. This is when those larger properties come down a little bit and become more affordable. This would be a wonderful time to come and sit with me for 5 or 10 minutes, have a cup of coffee, and talk about your next moves. Once again, thank you so much for your time and watching this video. I'll see you on the streets of the inner city.